What if the Red Wedding failed? What if the most infamous massacre in Westeros never happened, and the Starks walked out of the twins alive? What if the Red Wedding failed and the song of the Lannisters died in their own trap? Instead, we are not softening this story, we are not saving everyone from blood and grief. We are changing one night, haul one strike, and then following the ruin it leaves behind across the north, the Riverland's King's Landing, and beyond. You honor us, my king. Walder Frey rasps Robb forces a smile. The room is thick with heat and wine, and the smell of meat. The musicians tune their strings slowly, too slowly. From Frey to Bolton to the doors to the crossbows that are not there yet but might be, she listens to the music that has not started and feels her breath catch. In truth, it only takes a whisper to break a massacre. Before it begins, a loose-tongued Frey squire, a northern scout, seeing men arm in the yard, a servant girl who hears steel where there should be song. The warning reaches Catelyn first, or Grey Wind's snarl cuts through the hall, or a sworn sword shouts for his king, and the room goes silent. Hands freeze on cups. Knights reach for sword belts that should have been left at the door but somehow were not. Frey men on the balconies hesitate as northern eyes turn up toward them, and Roose Bolton's pale gaze flickers just once, as if weighing whether this does not need to end in blood, or if it was always going to. This is our divergence. Robb Stark is not caught helpless at table. He is on his feet with a sword in hand and his mother beside him. The king in the north is warned before the music plays. The crossbows do not fire on command. The first arrows go wild, and the first to fall might be a Frey or a Bolton instead of a Stark. If this continues, the twins become a slaughterhouse for traitors, trapped between a furious host inside and a northern army outside. From here, we follow the chain reaction Robb's next move. As king in the north with his banners still intact, the fate of Walder Frey when guest right fails and he cannot hide. Behind Lannister gold, the slow, cold reckoning, waiting for Roose Bolton if his treachery is exposed too early. Tywin Lannister's reputation if his masterstroke collapses in a single night and he is left holding the blame, but not the bodies. We will track how a living Robb reshapes Winterfell, Jon Snow and the Wall, whether the North ever needs another king in black. How Daenerys meets a Westeros that still remembers the young wolf when her ships finally land, and what all of this means when the dead come south and the true war begins. So step back into that hall at the Twins. Stand beside Catelyn Stark, feel the music about to start, and the air goes silent, and then walk with us through every consequence, from that held breath to the White Walkers and the Iron Throne. Dropped into the Twins. Seconds before the song, the Twins are hot with torchlight and wine breath when we drop back in. Cups are raised, bread and salt already broken, the air thick with smoke and the sour reek of the river below. The band at the far end of the room is still tuning, strings whining softly as men laugh too loudly and try to forget they are at the mercy of House Frey. Robb Stark stands beneath the leering gaze of Walder Frey. "My lord," he says, voice rough from too many councils and too little sleep, "I owe you the deepest of apologies. The words are the same, you remember." He bows his king's head. The old man's eyes glitter. He smiles that thin, wet smile and waves a spotted hand as if to dismiss a child. Catelyn Stark sits at his side, fingers resting on the stem of her cup, watching. Always watching. Her face is still, but her eyes move. To Edmure, flushed and dazed beside his new Frey bride. To the Blackfish, who drinks but does not soften. To the Greatjon, already half drunk and ready to roar at the slightest slight. She listens to every breath in the room, who waits for the music to start. Roose Bolton sits in pale silence, a shadow of cool detachment beside the warmth of northern banners and Riverlord colors. His hands are folded, his face unreadable, his eyes sliding slowly over the hall as if he is above all this wine and noise and blood. In truth, he looks exactly as he did that night, calm, still wrong. But something is off. Near a pillar, a Frey servant lingers too long, jug clutched so tight his knuckles are white as bone. He is not pouring. He is listening. A northern man-at-arms near the wall frowns up at a shuttered arrow slit, where a draft slips through the cracks like a cold finger on the back of his neck. He shifts his weight, hand brushing the hilt of his sword, then forces himself to laugh at some half-heard jest. From outside, faint through stone and song and talk, comes a distant howl. Grey wind. It cuts across the hall like a blade no one will name. A few men pause. The room goes silent for half a heartbeat before the noise rushes back in, forced and brittle. If this continues, someone is going to notice that the direwolf is not just restless. He is warning. Walder Frey leans forward on his high seat, watery eyes fixed on his guests, as if counting them, weighing them, measuring how much blood each name is worth. "You've broken my oath," he rasps, repeating the wound like a prayer. "But we are all friends tonight." The lie hangs there. Catelyn hears it. So does Roose. So does every Frey who will not quite meet a northerner's gaze. The camera moves, passing Edmure's foolish grin, the Blackfish's hard jaw, the Greatjohn's broad shoulders, Bolton's pale throat, Frey's twitching hands. No one explains the stakes. They're written in faces, in who is here and who is not, in the empty spaces where sworn swords should stand. Catelyn's fingers tighten around her cup. Her breath slows. Across the hall, the band finally settles. A bow is raised. The first scraping off key notes of The Rains of Castamere drag out of the vials, wrong and sharp against the warm noise of the feast. The room does not yet know why it goes silent. We cut there before any arrow can fly. The inciting divergence. Catelyn sees the chainmail. Catelyn moves before she thinks. Her hand leaves the cup, reaches for Roose Bolton's arm as in canon, seeking some human anchor in the wrongness of that song. Her fingers brush fine grey cloth. Then they find it. Not flesh, not bone, cold, ridged metal. The links press against her fingertips through the sleeve, hard and unyielding, and her breath stutters in her chest as the truth crawls up her spine. A lord in mail at a wedding feast. A supposed ally armored at his king's table. In truth, there is only one reason to come to bread and salt so prepared. For a heartbeat, she lies to herself. Bandits. Old fears. The twins are dangerous. Roose is cautious. She is a mother who sees ghosts in every shadow. She wants to snatch her hand back, to smooth the cloth and pretend she felt nothing. But the song scrapes on, The Rains of Castamere, dragging slow and off-key, and something in her that has buried Ned and 2 daughters and half the north refuses to be soothed. She looks up, slowly, past Roose's pale eyes, past the candles guttering in their sconces to the dark galleries above. There, between the carved arches, she catches a faint glint. Not torchlight on banners, on string, on nettle. Crossbows, cradled in Frey hands, their shapes half swallowed by shadow. Another glint at the far end. Another. Her gaze drops. Frey men easing along the walls, not drunk, not laughing, quietly closing doors that should stand open while a king feasts. The room goes silent inside her. A hollow, ringing silence where denial used to live. Guessed right. The bread, the salt, the shared cups of wine, all of it about to be drowned in blood. In canon, she freezes. Here, she moves. Her chair scrapes back hard enough to startle the nearest minstrels. She does not reach for Roose again. She reaches across the high table, snatches a knife from beside a roast, and lunges for the nearest Frey she can reach. Walder's young wife, pretty and terrified, or a grandson leaning in to hear some crude jest. Steel kisses soft throat before anyone quite understands what is happening. Stop the music. Her voice cuts through the hall, rough and sharp. The players falter. One viol shrieks a broken note. Stop the music now. The room goes silent for real this time. Frey archers hesitate in the shadows, fingers tight on strings that do not yet loose. Northern lords half rise from their benches, hands near sword hilts but not drawing, not yet willing to strike steel in a lord's hall. Roos's eyes narrow, calculating, a knight of the Dreadfort weighing whether to feign surprise or let the mask fall. "Guessed right," Catelyn says, louder, so every man hears. "We ate your bread and salt, Lord Frey. We drank your wine. Before gods and men you swore us safe." A knife presses harder, a thin line of blood beads against the blade. "Call off your men. Order those crossbows lowered. This does not need to end in blood." All eyes swing to Walder Frey. The old man's jaw works, his face mottling from pale to red as the accusation hangs between them. He is furious and exposed, his carefully laid trap named aloud before the first arrow can fly. If this continues, his house is ruined whether he kills a king or not. Walder's fingers drum once on the arm of his chair, then go still. Deny everything and hope to salvage honor, or give the order and damn Guest right forever. At the same moment, Robb Stark is halfway to his feet, hand hovering inches from his sword, eyes locked on his mother and the knife at the girl's throat. Draw steel and shatter sacred custom himself, or trust that words can still hold this crumbling hall together. We end here, on that razor's edge, with two kings in all but name about to choose what kind of war the twins will birth. Guest right on trial. Can the Red Wedding still happen? Robb moves first. Lord of the Crossing. His voice cuts across the music, sharp as a drawn sword. "Why do your men wear steel at my sister's wedding?" He does not stand all the way, not yet, but every northern knight behind him shifts slowly, hands near hilts, eyes on the Freys above. Catelyn does not wait. "Guessed right," she says, louder than the pipes. "You would spill blood under your own roof, Walder Frey?" Her breath comes fast as she drags the knife tighter to the girl's throat, forcing every gaze to her. "Hear me, all of you," she cries, voice rising until the room goes silent, save for the music that suddenly sounds thin and wrong. "If a single arrow flies, if one man strikes steel, I will name your crime to every lord in this hall and every camp outside. You will be kinslayer and oathbreaker before half the realm." The word hangs there. Guessed right. Older than kings, older than Freys and Starks both. Men who had been ready to kill are suddenly very still. Walder Frey blusters, face mottled red. "I'll wear what I please in my own hall," he snaps. "I am Lord of the Crossing. These are my men, my walls. You come here breaking oaths and dare question my armor?" He wraps his fingers on the breastplate beneath his cloak, as if defiance alone can smother the fear flickering in his eyes. Roose Bolton's voice slides in, cold and controlled. "My lords," he says, "tensions are high. Swords half drawn have a way of leaping free. This does not need to end in blood." He does not move from Robb's side, but his pale eyes measure every corner of the room, every crossbowman in the shadows. Robb rises now fully. "Lord Walder," he says, giving the old man his title but not an inch more. "You feasted me beneath your roof. You named me Guest. You swore bread and salt before the gods. As king in the north, I demand an explanation for this display." Around him, the northern lords stand with him, not speaking but making their answer. With their bodies, a wall of steel and weathered faces. Greatjon, Karstark men, Mormont soldiers, all watching, all witnesses. In truth, if this continues for even a heartbeat too long, the twins become a slaughterhouse no one can deny. Here is the bind, and every man in the room feels it. If Walder gives the word and the first quarrel flies, he proves Catelyn's accusation before dozens of lords who know the law. There will be survivors. There will be songs. No king in the south can wash that stain away. But if he backs down, if he lets this moment pass, Tywin Lannister's careful plan begins to crack. The Freys lose their chance to end the Northern War in a single strike, and the Lion's promised favor may turn to wrath. Pattern breaks. Walder slams his hand on the table. "Stop the music!" he roars. The pipes die at once. "Lower your bloody weapons," he snarls at his men, spitting the words. Crossbows tilt, blades sink a few inches back into scabbards, though not all the way. The room is not safe, only held. "Your Grace," Walder says at last, voice oiled again. "There has been a misunderstanding. Come, you, your lady mother, Lord Bolton, a few of your lords. We will settle this privately in my solar. No need to trouble the whole hall." Robb does not answer yet. Every breath in the room is waiting, balanced on what kind of king he chooses to be in the next step. And he is already walking toward that side door, toward a smaller room where no music will cover the sound of the first scream. Behind closed doors, Stark, Frey, and Bolton face off. The door shuts behind them with a dull thud, and the sound of the hall fades, as if someone has dragged a thick curtain over the world. Smoke curls from a single brazier in the cramped solar, making the air heavy, making every breath feel slow and hot. One table, one flickering candle. Robb and Catelyn on one side with the Blackfish looming at his king's shoulder. Greatjon half a step back, hand never far from his sword. On the other, Walder Frey, a thin, sharp-eyed heir at his elbow, and Roose Bolton standing a little apart, pale eyes unreadable. No minstrels here, no music to hide the first scream. For a heartbeat, no one speaks. The room goes silent, in a way the great hall never could, because there is nowhere to look but at one another's eyes, nowhere to run if a man decides to strike. Walder's fingers drum on the table, bony and impatient. Robb's knuckles are white on the chair back as he remains standing, a king who refuses to sit in this den. Catelyn moves first. Slowly, deliberately, she reaches across and flicks the edge of Roose Bolton's fine sleeve with 2 fingers. "My lord," she says, voice low but carrying, "your velvet does not hide steel as well as you think. The fabric rides up just enough to show the dull gray of chainmail underneath." A gaze slides to the door they entered by. Crossbows in the rafters, doors barred behind my son's men, and that song beginning just as the cups were filled. She does not raise her voice, but each word lands like a blow. "Do you take us for fools, Lord Frey?" Walder opens his mouth, shuts it, then bares his teeth. "You broke your word," he snaps at Robb, spittle catching the candlelight. "You made a king of yourself and made a fool of me. My house mocked, my honor in the mud. What did you expect, boy? That I'd smile and kiss your hand?" He leans forward, breath ragged. Lannister gold pays better than northern thanks, and Tywin does not forget his friends. The north is already promised, Bolton saw to that. Roose's eyes flick toward him, a tiny, lethal movement. In truth, Walder has said too much. Roose recovers quickly. "I wear mail because we are at war," he says, voice smooth, almost bored. "If this continues, if tempers fray and some drunken knight decides to play the hero, I prefer to be alive to regret it." He inclines his head to Robb, careful, measuring. "I have ridden at your side in battle, your grace. My men bled for your banners. I have made no move against you tonight." He is probing, testing whether there is still a path back, whether he can step away from the noose Walder is busy tightening. Robb finally sits, only to lean forward, both hands flat on the table. His eyes are hard now, the boy kin burned away, leaving something colder. "You have made enough moves," he says. "Here is how this will go. Every Frey weapon in this castle is to be surrendered to my captains, now. You will give me hostages, 2 of your sons and a grandson, to guarantee safe passage for my people." His gaze cuts to Roose and does not waver. "And you, Lord Bolton, will swear before the Seven and before the old gods you have not given my crown to the Iron Throne, and that you will not raise sword against me." The room goes silent again, thicker than before. Robb does not blink. "Refuse," he says, "and I name this open treason. One word from me, and my men seize these walls." This does not need to end in blood, but it will, if you choose it. Outside, faint through stone, the hall's music stutters, as if the castle itself is holding its breath, waiting to see who moves first. The plot unravels. When the ambush becomes a siege, music scrapes to a halt. A lute string snaps with a sharp twang that cuts through the hall, and for a heartbeat, everyone just stares, caught between feast and fight. Outside the doors, Grey Wind's howl knifes through the stone again, longer now, more frantic, as if the direwolf can smell the blood that has not yet been spilled. Men along the trestle benches slowly set down their cups. The great John's eyes narrow. The air feels wrong. At the high table, Walder Frey's fingers drum. Then still. His gaze flicks to the side doors, where crossbowmen should already be in place. Instead, a nervous sergeant is arguing with a Blackfish outrider, the man's hand resting just a little too close to his sword. In the yard below, captains of the northern host watch Frey guards begin to cluster at the gatehouse, closing ranks where there should be open passage. A cart is dragged across the inner gate. Torches are lit along the walls, though the night is not yet deep. One Umber bannerman mutters that this is wrong and reaches for his horn. Inside, Brynden Tully moves first. He leans behind Robb's chair, as if to refill his cup, and murmurs a single order to a waiting squire. The boy blanches, then slips away down the side of the room, carrying the word like a drawn blade. "Be ready, hands to hilts, watch the galleries." The great Jun catches the look, understands in an instant. He laughs too loudly, shoves back from the table, and lurches down the benches, slapping shoulders. But his grip is iron when he squeezes a captain's arm and hisses under his breath to form ranks near the doors, to count every Frey knight on the balconies. The room goes silent in pockets now, conversations dying as men feel the current shift beneath their feet. Walder sees it. In truth, he sees everything. The way the northern men angle their chairs, the way their breaths slow, the way even Catelyn Stark's eyes never leave his face. He thinks of the camps outside, thousands of hard men with swords and long memories, all sworn to a young king who is not yet dead. If this continues, he realizes, the twins are not a trap, they are a box, and he is locked inside with wolves. His voice comes out thin but sharp. "Open the doors," he rasps. "Let the king's men have their air. We will see them off at dawn." Roose Bolton's head tilts, just enough for Robb to see. A warning? A test? Robb cannot tell, but he does not lower his guard. Catelyn seizes the opening. "And my son, and I, and his lords, walk out with them," she says, each word a strike. No crossbows, no songs, no knives in the dark. Walder's mouth twists. "You'll stay the night, you and the young wolf, and your chief men." Guessed right cuts both ways. "I'll have surety you don't turn my halls into a battlefield before morning." Robb's jaw clenches. He hears Grey Wind again, a distant, savage rhythm to his own racing heart. "Then we trade," he answers. "You keep high-born hostages. We keep Freys of equal rank. Your sons, your grandsons. The twins stand only so long as both sides behave." The room goes silent once more, thicker than any prayer. One by one, names are spoken. Edmure Tully steps forward, pale but steady. Black Walder is shoved into Stark hands, snarling. Frey girls weep as they are pulled toward northern lines, while Karstark and Umber heirs are guided the other way, each side building a fragile wall of living shields. Through it all, Roose Bolton does not move. He watches the slow exchange of kin, the tightening Frey throats, the way Robb still trusts him enough to stand within arm's reach. His pale eyes flick from Robb's unarmored chest to Walder's trembling hands, to the distant sound of horns as northern companies form. In that quiet, he chooses. But he says nothing, not yet. His hand rests, light as a whisper, on the hilt of his sword as he calculates which king he will kneel to when dawn comes, and what price in blood that choice will demand. Roose Bolton's choice, betrayer or savior of the North. Roose's hand stays on the sword, but his mind is already 3 moves ahead. Tywin's letters promised him the wardenship of the North, a title wrapped in gold and southern ink. Yet here he stands in a drafty stone hall that smells of wet dog and Frey fear, watching the supposed massacre wobble on the edge of failure. He studies Robb Stark as the young king laughs politely at some Frey jest, unaware of the knives meant for his heart. Robb has won every field battle he has fought. Tywin has only won with quills and poison cups. If this continues and the slaughter misfires, whose name will the North whisper as Oathbreaker? Frey, Bolton, or Lannister? Roose feels the weight of every possibility settle on his pale shoulders. In truth, he sees 2 paths. He could double down on Tywin, carve the wolf's throat himself, and trust that the crown will shield him from the storm of northern vengeance. Or he could slither back beneath the Stark banner, blame Walter's greed, and present himself as the cold, necessary savior who stayed the slaughter. Either way, he wants the same thing he has always wanted, to stand beside the winning king when the blood dries. Walder Frey shifts on his high seat, fingers twitching, eyes flicking toward the musicians who still wait for his signal. The old man is shaking. Roose feels a stab of contempt. Walder is incompetent, a petty lord playing at king-making with bad wine and worse sons. Trusting him with such a precise strike was always a risk. A clean, silent butchery is already slipping away. So Roose chooses the sharper edge. He steps forward when the toasts are called, raises his cup, and lets his voice carry. He swears again to Robb Stark, to the king in the North, to the old gods and the new. The room goes silent for a heartbeat as Northern and Riverlord eyes turn to him, surprised at the fervor in his words. Walder's lips thin, but he forces a brittle smile. This does not need to end in blood, Roose implies with every careful phrase. It is a lie. That night, as the feast thins and drunk men stagger to pallets and corners, Roose moves like a shadow through the stone corridors. He gives quiet orders to picked men in Frey colors and his own, a last-ditch assassination, not a feast hall slaughter. Kill the king in his bed. Take Grey Wind first, open the gate for Lannister gold later. No musicians, no crossbow storm, just a knife in the dark and a body cooling before dawn. The plan dies the moment the first man nears the kennels. Grey Wind is already pacing, hackles raised, sensing the wrongness in the air. The direwolf explodes through wood and iron, teeth flashing, blood spraying across the courtyard stones as he tears into the lead assassin. The screams rip through the night. Robb's personal guard, half-armored but fully awake, surges toward the sound with swords drawn. Steel clashes in narrow passages, torches gutter. Men shout half-formed orders as Frey and Bolton killers are caught between northern shields and their own panic. A Frey heir, drunk and eager for glory, rushes forward with his sword high. He dies choking on his own blood as a Northman's axe bites deep. By the time the smoke clears from overturned braziers and burning tapestries, Roose's treachery is no longer rumor. Captured men spit his name. In the great hall, under the staring eyes of stone kings and weeping servants, Robb has Walder Frey and Roose Bolton dragged before him in chains. Their breaths come fast, their finery is torn, and for a brief, terrible moment, the room goes silent again as every lord present understands what has been broken, guessed right itself. Robb's voice is low but steady as he names their crimes. Treason, attempted regicide, the spilling of guest blood under a Frey roof. Walder shrieks, Roose stays cold, but neither can cut through the tide now. By dawn, their banners are hauled down, their swords taken, and the twins stand under Stark occupation. A choke point on the Green Fork suddenly turned into a northern fortress. The Red Wedding has failed, but the war has not ended. It has only changed shape, and the next move will decide whether the North rises united or burns from within. Short time skip, the North holds the crossing dawn, does not bring peace, it brings a new map. In the days that follow, the twins slowly transform from a slaughterhouse that never was into a fortress draped in wolf and trout. Frey banners are ripped down in the courtyards, their pale blue and grey trampled into the mud, while stark direwolves and tully-leaping fish climb the stone like a fresh tide. Men move through the halls with swords bared, checking every door, every stair, every shadow where a crossbowman might have waited. Lord Walder is dragged from his high seat, spitting and wheezing, his eyes still bright with a kind of hateful courage. Roose Bolton is taken with far less noise, his face as calm as if he were entering a quiet room for supper. They are locked in separate, airless cells in the bowels of the bridge, stone pressing close, torch smoke thick, the only sound their own breath and the distant rush of the Green Fork below. For the first time, the men who tried to sell the North for a Lannister crown have nowhere to run. Word does not walk out of the twins. It flies. Ravens burst into the grey sky, one after another, wings beating hard toward every corner of the war. South to King's Landing, where Tywin Lannister will read of a failed Red Wedding and understand in an instant that his clean, silent victory has turned to blood and chains. West, across the Riverlands, to every burned village and broken holdfast that once cursed Robb Stark's absence, and now hears that guest right was merely shattered over their heads. North and east to the Dreadfort and the Vale, where lords measure their next move in heartbeats. In truth, the shock is not that Walder and Roose tried this, it is that they failed. At the Dreadfort, mutters rise like smoke as lesser Boltons imagine what will happen if this continues and their flayed man is pulled down beside the twins' crossing. In the Vale, bronze-clad knights whisper in silent corridors, weighing whether a living king in the north holding the Green Fork is safer than a distant boy king in the capital. The macro stakes harden into something simple and brutal. Robb Stark now controls the only great bridge over the Green Fork between the Neck and the Golden Tooth. Every Lannister march into the Riverlands must reckon with a northern sword at its throat. More than that, he holds proof that Tywin's allies were ready to break the oldest law in Westeros. The Red Wedding that never happened becomes a story of northern vigilance instead of northern weakness, a weapon of words sharper than any blade. Yet the victory is not clean. The Karstark betrayal still hangs over Robb like a shadow at noon. He remembers Rickard Karstark's blood on the stone, the way the room goes silent after his sword fell, and he knows some of his own men still wonder if a king who kills his own lord can keep their trust. In the Riverlands, the Blackfish rides hard, rallying riverlords who have seen their lands burned twice over, while Edmure Tully sits with his shame, a groom whose wedding feast turned into a near massacre. The Brotherhood without banners hears only fragments. Freys in chains, a would-be butchered king still breathing. Around their fires, some call it the Lord of Light's justice, others the old gods striking back. The board is reset, but the pieces are bloodied. Robb has unmasked his enemies and kept his army alive, yet every path from the twins leads into deeper war. Does he drive west for Casterly Rock, to strike at the Lion's Heart, march east on King's Landing while Tywin reels, or turn his face north, back toward Winterfell and the smoking ruins of his home? The young wolf stands at the crossing, and whichever road he chooses will decide not just who wins this war, but what kind of king he becomes. Robb's War Council, Casterly Rock, King's Landing, or home. The choice does not wait. It presses in on the canvas walls like the cold river wind as Robb stands over the war map, eyes fixed on the carved stone lion at Casterly Rock. The tent is crowded and close, torches spitting smoke, the long table buried beneath a painted Westeros, where wood and stone mark the fate of men. Direwolves for the north and riverlands, lions for the west, a crown for King's Landing, a crude kraken jammed into the boards where Winterfell once stood. Around it, his lords argue until the sound is a constant low roar, like distant surf against rock. Great John Umber slams his fist beside the lion. We ride west now, before the old lion can draw a clean breath. His voice cuts through the room. You're unbeaten in the field, my king. Every man in the realm knows it. We strike at Casterly Rock and end Tywin in his den. He jabs a thick finger at the coast. The Freys failed. The Boltons failed. Let the Lannisters taste what it is to be hunted. Others take up the cry. Karstark men, still hungry for blood. Young knights whose swords have not yet dulled. They speak of the shock of the failed Red Wedding, of Western lords wondering if the lions can still protect them, of how a single burning banner on the rock's high towers would shatter Tywin's name forever. But the Blackfish leans over the map and slowly turns the kraken at Winterfell upright. Or we remember we have a home, he says, voice quiet but cutting. The room goes silent for a breath. The Ironborn still squat in your father's hall. The north bleeds. If this continues, and the south tears itself apart, will the north stand when no one is left to help it? Robb hears the words like stones dropping into deep water. He sees snow on broken walls, hears Bran's laughter as a ghost in the back of his mind, feels Grey Wind's restless breath at his side. Catelyn watches him, fingers tight on the edge of the table. She has already watched one son die in a southern war in truth, and almost watched another at the Twins. Glory will not keep you warm in winter, she says, but we cannot leave Tywin unpunished, or every lord in Westeros will learn the same lesson Walder Frey did. That guest right and oaths mean nothing if the reward is rich enough. This does not need to end in blood, one cautious lord murmurs, speaking of truces, of hostages, of sending word to King's Landing while Tywin reels. Greyjohn snorts, hand on his sword, but even he does not quite laugh. Robb studies the map. West is vengeance. North is duty. South is a poisoned crown. He thinks of the Twins' hall painted in Frey blood, of how close his mother came to dying on that rush-strewn floor. When he finally speaks, his voice is steady. We do both, he says. The room goes silent again. The North must be free to stand alone if the South burns. Winterfell must be ours. His hand moves, placing a direwolf at the neck. Blackfish, you'll ride north with the Manderleys and the mountain clans. Take back my home. Make every man who bent the knee to Bolton or Greyjoy remember whose sword guards the north. Then he takes the last direwolf and sets it on the golden coast, facing the lion. I will go west, a lean host, our best horse, men who know what it is to survive betrayal. Tywin thinks the north is broken. His eyes harden. We will show him what a wounded wolf can do. Outside, the river wind rises, rattling the tent, as if the world itself is listening for which road the young wolf truly walks, and what waits for him in the shadow of Casterly Rock. Tywin's nightmare, when the masterstroke backfires. Far to the south, as that river wind rises around Robb's tent, another wind is turning in King's Landing. The small council chamber is silent, except for the scrape of chair legs and the slow rasp of Varys's breath as the first raven is read. Pycelle's hands tremble. Reports from the Twins, my Lord Hand, fighting in the halls. Crossbows turned on northern guests. Lord Walder, taken prisoner. Roose Bolton named traitor. And he swallows. The king in the north still lives. Joffrey surges to his feet. That old fool promised me a wolf's head. His eyes flash wild. I want Frey's head instead. I am the king. I will have it. His voice cracks on the last word, but the rage is real, bright as fresh blood on stone. Cersei's fingers curl on the table. The North should have bent the knee when they had the chance. She hisses, stubborn, faithless. Robb Stark should have died in that hall. She looks to Tywin as if a single command from him can still reach the twins, still strike the young wolf down. Tywin does not move. He stares at the broken wax, at the cramped Frey hand, at the careful way the maester has avoided writing the words "guessed right." In truth, he does not need them. He reads between every line. A deniable stroke, arranged in shadows, has failed in the open. The sword he meant to drive cleanly into the North's heart has slipped, cutting where all can see. If this continues, he thinks, the damage will not be measured in dead men, but in faith. Faith in the Lannister name. Faith in the Iron Throne itself. Varys's soft voice intrudes. "More ravens, my lord. From Seaguard, from Riverrun. They speak of a butcher's feast at the Twins, of crossbows hidden above the hall, of northern knights cut down at table, and Stark men fighting their way out through the music. The room goes silent as the word spreads, invisible, through the capital, guessed right broken. And the Starks alive to tell it." Joffrey slams a fist on the table. "Then say it was Walder. Say the Freys plotted without leave. We will send his head to the wolf. This does not need to end in blood for us." Tywin's eyes flick toward him. Cold. It already has. He knows the bind forming around his throat. The crown cannot praise a massacre without losing half the realm to disgust and fear. Yet if Robb Stark rides from the Twins crying Lannister treachery, if northern singers make a song of crossbows and poisoned cups, silence will sound like confession. Cersei leans forward. Deny everything. Call it a Riverlord quarrel. Say the Freys turned on their guests over broken oaths. Precisely, Tywin says, slowly. Walder Frey and Roose Bolton will be named outlaws. The crown will condemn them publicly. He exhales a measured breath, already calculating which western banners can be raised, which Riverlords can be bought, how quickly gold can move where ravens cannot. We will distance ourselves from their folly and answer Stark steel with open war, not whispers. What he underestimates in that silent room is what a failed slaughter creates. A king who walks out of the Twins alive is no longer just a boy with a sword. He is the wolf who escaped the noose, and legends like that are far harder to kill than men. While Tywin signs the orders that cast Frey and Bolton as rogues, the next ravens are already in flight, carrying Robb Stark's version of the night to every lord who still fears to eat bread and salt under another man's roof. The North without the Boltons, Winterfell's different fate. The first ravens reach White Harbor before the blood at the Twins is even dry on the rushes. Wyman Manderly reads Robb's seal once, then twice, his eyes narrowing as he takes in the king's command. Send ships, send men, send a hard, unbending message that the North is not broken. In truth, he has been waiting for this. His green and white banners rise over the masts, and a northern detachment that Robb peeled away before the feast, led either by the Blackfish or a trusted Stark bannerman sworn to Manderly, turns its march homeward with a single order. Clear the coasts, clear Winterfell, clear the Doubt. They move slowly at first, gathering stragglers and broken men who fled the Ironborn raids. Then faster as word spreads that the king in the north lives. Villages that hid in silent fear now send boys with spears and old knights with rusted mail to join them. Every mile north tightens the noose around the dread fort without a sword being drawn. Because Roose Bolton's name is already poison. Tywin's letters cannot save him. Once the failed massacre is known, the man who sat at Robb's council table and reached for a hidden blade becomes a byword for treachery. There is no royal decree naming him Warden of the North, no polite fiction to cloak his ambition. Ramsay is not a legitimized Bolton, only a bastard whose flayed man banners now mark him as outlaw rather than rightful heir. If this continues, their terror campaign never flowers into open rule. It withers in the dark, hunted, denied the thin cover of southern law. So Winterfell falls differently. Instead of Bolton riders arriving as supposed saviors, it is Manderly ships that choke the white knife and umbers that thunder down from the last hearth. Sir, when men slip through the burned outer walls, they know stone by stone. The Ironborn, already stretched and cut off from Pike by Stannis' tighter grip on the narrow sea, find themselves trapped between river and ruin. The fight is brutal, close, full of smoke and short, panicked breaths in the godswood as steel meets flesh. But every strike is made in Robb Stark's name. When the last Reaver dies, the room goes silent in the great hall of Winterfell. A Stark banner, grey direwolf on white, goes back up over the broken gate. Not a flayed man. No pink crosses, no kennels full of screaming. That single difference rewrites Sansa Stark's fate. There is no royal plan to marry a northern lady to a newly made Bolton Lord of Winterfell. No quiet parchment that sells her to Ramsay. Sansa remains a southern piece on a southern board, shuttled between the capital and the Vale, her political education shaped by Lannister venom and Littlefinger's whispers rather than by snow, hounds, and flaying knives. Her scars are real, but different. She learns to read a court's breath and a council's eyes instead of learning how to leap from Winterfell's walls. And far to the north, atop the wall, Jon Snow feels the world tilt. Ravens sent from Castle Black no longer fly toward a Bolton stronghold that sees only crowns and enemies. They fly toward a restored Winterfell, to lords who still remember Ned Stark's quiet warnings about what walks in the cold. A stable, Stark-held north means that when the dead finally come, the wall's plea will reach not traitors seeking titles, but kin who still believe that this does not need to end in blood, unless the dead insist on it. And if they do, the answering sword will be heavier, and it will bear a wolf on its pommel. Robb marches west, a new young wolf campaign. Robb does not turn north, the wolf turns west. The column snakes out from the twins at dawn, smaller than the great host that first crossed the neck, but harder, leaner, its banners snapping in the cold wind as if they too remember the music that never finished. Men march with dried Frey blood still on their cloaks, and already singers ride among them, whispering half-formed verses about a king who walked into a slaughter and walked out with a castle. They call it divine justice. They call it Stark cunning. In truth, it is survival sharpened into purpose. The young wolf rides near the front, grey wind pacing at his stirrup, eyes always moving. He listens as the songs spread down the line. But he does not smile. Karstark's head on the block, Bolton's cold betrayal, the crossbowmen hidden above the feast hall. Each memory sits with him like another weight on his sword arm. If this continues, he knows, songs will not be enough to hold this army together. So his rule tightens. Robb moves through his own camp like a king who has seen the inside of a death trap and refuses to stand under another untested roof. Vassals who once dined freely now send hostages to his tent before councils. Oaths are sworn again, this time on steel and on the old gods, with grey wind circling slow and silent behind the kneeling men. He leans on a smaller circle. Blackfish Tully, Great John Umber, Galbart Glover, a few riverlords who chose him at the Green Fork and never wavered, and keeps the rest at sword's length. The strategy in the west is simple on the surface and vicious underneath. He will bleed Lannister gold before he ever tries to break Lannister walls. His outriders strike along the Red Fork, burning storehouses, seizing caravans bound for Lannisport, dragging captive lions back in chains so every campfire can see that the West is not untouchable. Each raid edges him closer to Casterly Rock, not to storm it outright, but to force Tywin to divide his strength or watch his own lands stripped. Let us ride with the raiders. Some go to riverlords who bent the knee to the Iron Throne after the Green Fork, others to reachmen nursing quiet grudges under Tyrell's smiles. Robb offers them a choice: stand aside and let the lion and the wolf tear each other, or move at the moment when Lannister armor is thinnest. This does not need to end in blood, he writes once, unless you stand in my way. Word of the twins spreads faster than any raven. To Lannister soldiers, the tale curdles into something close to fear. A northern king who cheated the stranger in a hall hung with crossbows, who turned a wedding into a noose for his enemies instead of for himself. To his own men, every breath beside their living king feels like proof the old gods still watch. They march longer, sleep shorter, and when they sharpen their swords, they do it facing west. Then the scouts return. Dust on the horizon, heavy tracks in the soft riverland mud, reports of a great Lannister host moving out from the Golden Tooth, knights in bright crimson, siege trains, banners of the Lion and its lesser allies, all flowing toward the line of Robb's advance. The room of his war tent goes silent as the map fills with red markers. Robb studies them, jaw tight, thumb resting on the carved wolf that marks his own position. The last time he trusted in surprise, he walked into the twins. Now the surprise is riding for him. He exhales slowly, orders ripple outward, scouts redeployed, baggage lightened, raiding parties recalled or redirected to harry the flanks of an enemy they have not yet seen. Every man in the camp can feel it in the air, like the held breath before a sword strike. If the Red Wedding made him a legend, this battle will decide whether that legend is a beginning or the last verse of a half-finished song. The twins as leverage. Walder and Roose on the block. Dawn breaks cold over the twins. Walder Frey sits chained in his own hall, the high-backed chair taken from him, forced instead onto a plain wooden stool that creaks under his weight. His silks are gone, rough wool itches his spotted skin. Around him, the room goes silent each time a guard shifts, each time a sword scrapes against stone. His watery eyes flick from face to face, counting enemies, counting possible cracks in the wall that has closed on him. Roose Bolton is held apart, in a small tower chamber with no fire. His cloak has been stripped, the flayed man torn away, his pale throat bare. He studies the frost on the arrow slit, measures the footsteps on the stair, listens to every slow breath of the guards beyond the door. In truth, Roose is already at work, building contingencies in his head, weighing whether fear, gold, or secrets will buy him the most time. Robb walks the length of the great hall where Walder waits, Catelyn at his side, grey wind pacing like a shadow. The banners of the direwolf and trout hang over Frey Blue, and that sight alone is a judgment. Catelyn's voice is low but hard as iron, as they speak behind a screen, out of Walder's hearing yet close enough that he can feel each word like a distant strike. "They are traitors," she says. "They spilled northern blood under our bread and salt. Guest right cannot stand if this continues." Robb's jaw tightens. "If I take their heads now, I lose my best pieces against the Lannisters." The Freys hold crossings. The Boltons hold the Dreadfort. The Crown will say nothing of guest right, but they will whisper loudly of a rebel king butchering his prisoners. "This does not need to end in blood," Catelyn answers, though even she does not sound convinced. "Not all of it. Use them. Make them confess. Let the River Lord see." So Robb chooses a middle path. Not quiet throat cuttings in a cell, not easy pardons traded for swords, but public judgment. Maesters are summoned. Lords of the Trident and North are called into the hall. When Walder Frey is dragged before them, when Roose Bolton is brought down from his cold perch, the room goes silent again. But this time, it is the silence of witnesses. Oaths are read. Letters from Tywin seized in the chaos are laid out. Under questioning, Walder blusters, denies, then breaks, spitting blame in every direction. Roose never raises his voice, yet his calm words make it plain. They plotted with the Crown to slaughter a king beneath their roof. Robb does not rant. He speaks of bread and salt, of the old laws that bound first men and Andals alike, of how even a king must kneel to something older than his sword. He names himself not only king in the north, but defender of those ancient laws the Iron Throne has chosen to ignore. When sentence falls, it is recorded in ink as well as in blood. Maesters scratch every word. Ravens wait. Walder Frey dies screaming. Before the sun sets, his head is set on a spike above his own gate, sagging, thin hair blowing in the wind where banners once flew. Below, Roose Bolton watches as his flayed man banners are dragged into the yard, piled high and burned before the assembled host. Fire eats the red man on pink, smoke curling into a silent sky. That image rides faster than any cavalry. By nightfall, men in 3 river keeps are already whispering of the king who keeps guest right with steel. King's Landing under pressure, Joffrey's wedding in a different war. By the time that image reaches King's Landing, the city is already dressing itself in gold and purple. Silk banners hang from every tower, singers rehearse their verses, and the small folk are promised bread and spectacle as their young king takes his bride. On the surface, Joffrey's wedding is splendor and song. Underneath, every high-born breath in the capital is tight with a different rhythm, the steady drumbeat of northern victories that refuse to die. The throne room is polished, the iron throne glinting like a piled sword grave under torchlight, but courtiers speak more slowly than before. Whispers of Robb Stark crossing the trident again, of Frey banners torn down and Bolton flayed, men burned in their own yard, slip between the pillars like cold air. The room goes silent whenever a raven arrives from the Riverlands. Eyes cutting toward the doors, waiting for the next report of some Lannister host, shattered in the rain. In truth, this is not the triumphant union Tywin Lannister once imagined. His letters to Highgarden have grown more urgent, the language harder, the promises thinner. The Tyrells still come, still drape the city in roses and gold, but their smiles are edged. Mace boasts as always, yet even he counts the number of Western lords who have not answered Tywin's call. Olenna watches the old lion from across the feast hall, measuring every line in his face, every hint that his sword arm is finally overreached. With the north unbroken, the reach is less overawed. The Tyrells do not speak of binding their whole future to Lannister blood as carelessly. They press for more guarantees, more hostages, more say on the council. If this continues, they want the option to step away from a sinking ship. Sansa's claim to Winterfell glows brighter to them now, not just as a pretty ornament, but as a possible bridge to a rising northern king. Against this backdrop, the question of Joffrey's life sharpens. Olenna's reasons to be rid of a cruel, unstable king remain. So do Littlefinger's hungers for chaos and leverage. But chaos in a realm where Tywin dominates is one thing. Chaos when Robb Stark is already winning is another. Pityr weighs every rumor from the twins, every tale of Freys kneeling in their own hall, and sees that the board is less certain. But dead Joffrey might hand the moral high ground to a northern coalition that already claims to fight a just war. Cersei feels none of these subtleties. To her, each northern victory is a personal insult. Each rebel lord a traitor who should have died with Ned. She stalks the Red Keep like a cornered she-wolf, snapping at counselors, demanding more men, more gold, more blood. This does not need to end in blood, Pycelle wheezes once, but her eyes flash and the old maester falls silent. She sees plots in every Tyrell courtesy, betrayal in every delay from Casterly Rock. So when the wedding feast begins, when wine flows and singers strike their first notes, the tension in the hall is a second, invisible guest. If Joffrey falls choking before the whole court, does Tommen's softer rules steady a regime fighting on 2 fronts? Or does the crown simply trade one mad boy for a gentler mask over a crumbling foundation? Jon Snow's path without a red wedding at the wall? None of that matters. Not at first. Snow still falls, the wind still cuts like a sword, and Jon Snow is still a nameless bastard taking the black while kings bleed far to the south. He rides with Cor in half hand, he slips among the wildlings, he lies to Ygritte with his eyes open. The climb still comes. Fingers raw and breath burning as they haul themselves up the frozen face of the world. From the top of the wall, the north looks endless and silent, but in truth, it is not leaderless. There is still a Stark king at Winterfell, still banners that have not been burned. When Jon is ordered to break his vows and join Mance, the command cuts deeper now. In canon, he thinks the North is lost. Here, ravens from the South tell a different story. Robb alive, Freys disgraced, Boltons broken on their own treachery. Each new report arrives slowly, ink still drying, and every word is a fresh strike against Jon's fragile sense of duty. His brother is not a memory. His king is not a ghost. He is turning the tide while Jon pretends to turn his cloak. The room goes silent in the common hall when the first clear letter is read aloud. King Robb holds Riverrun. King Robb marches. Men of the Watch exchange glances. Some northern recruits cannot quite hide their pride. Jon feels it like a hand closing around his throat. He could ride south. He could stand at Robb's side instead of on this frozen wall of dead stone. If this continues, which oath does he truly break by staying? Then the wildling host moves. The dead stir in the woods. Castle Black braces for the storm. Now when Maester Aemon's ravens take wing, they do not fly toward a flayed man's banner. They fly to a united Stark-led North, to a young king who still remembers sitting with his bastard brother in Winterfell's yard, wooden swords in hand. Does Robb answer? In this timeline, his strength is greater, his enemies more numerous. Stannis holds the capital. The Lannisters snarl from the west. The Riverlands still bleed. Robb knows every man he sends north is a man not there when the next Lannister strike comes. He has never seen a White Walker. He has seen Tywin's work in blood and ash. Which threat feels more real to a boy king raised on tales of lions, not ice demons? If he underestimates the danger, the battle for Castle Black may be smaller, more desperate, Jon forced to hold with fewer southern reinforcements. If he believes, the banners of the North might appear through the snow, stark wolves howling on the ice, changing the timing of everything that follows when the long night truly falls. And through it all, Jon's path bends. No red wedding, no shattered myth of a murdered king in the North, no sudden vacuum to drag a bastard upward. As he rises in the watch, as command slowly settles on his shoulders, Robb's crown still gleams to the south, a weight that keeps Jon's name small even while his deeds grow. This does not need to end in blood, not between brothers. But if the truth of his parentage ever reaches Winterfell while Robb still lives, does the North accept 2 sons of Rhaegar's rebellion? Or only one? Somewhere beyond the wall, something ancient is watching, waiting to see which Stark the Cold will claim first. Daenerys and the dragon equation, a stronger North in her path far to the east. Another storm is gathering, one that does not care which Stark the Cold chooses. Daenerys Targaryen still walks the red streets of Astapor, still hears the crack of the slaver's whip, still says the word that changes everything. Dracarys. The first chain breaks exactly as it did before. She buys the Unsullied, turns them with a single command, and watches as fire and spears erase centuries of cruelty. From Astapor to Yunkai to Meereen, her path is lined with burned masters and broken wheels. The girl with 3 dragons becomes a queen in all but name, her eyes always drifting west when the room is silent and the map of the world lies open before her. In truth, at first the stories that reach her are the same: a cruel boy king on a barbed throne, a golden lion family bleeding the realm dry. Whispers of wildfire, of heads on spikes above the city gates. She imagines one enemy, one strike, one sword. Then the tales change. Merchants out of Braavos arrive with northern furs and Riverlander grain, speaking of a different king. A wolf king, a young man who walked into a wedding meant to be his grave and came out with his enemies in chains. They say the twins belong to him now, that the Freys kneel or hang, that the crossing is held by banners bearing a grey direwolf and a crowned sword. Sailors in Meereen's winehouses argue over it, their breath hot with spice and fear. Some swear the lions still rule from King's Landing. Others insist the true war is between lion and wolf, south and north, and that the boy on the Iron Throne is no more than a puppet with a crown. Daenerys listens. She slowly traces the narrow sea with one finger, from Slaver's Bay to the Bight, to White Harbor, to King's Landing. One enemy has become two, or perhaps two enemies have become one opportunity. Does she see Robb Stark as a rival king to be burned away, another usurper stealing what is hers by right? Or does she see him as a shield, a northern blade keeping the Lannisters busy while her ships land far from their strongest walls? If this continues, if the lions and wolves tear at each other long enough, she could step ashore to find both bleeding out. Barristan's quiet counsel matters here. He knows the North. He remembers Ned's eyes. Robb's honor by rumor, if not by sight. When he speaks of the Wolf King, he does not speak with the same cold contempt he reserves for the Lannisters. This does not need to end in blood between dragon and direwolf, he suggests. Not if ravens fly before swords are drawn. So the idea forms. Secret envoys sent from White Harbor on fast, low ships. A northern maester in plain robes slipping into Marine under cover of trade. Letters sealed with a direwolf and a three-headed dragon, never spoken of in any maester's chronicle. Even if the messages never cross, the possibility changes the board. Daenerys is no longer sailing toward a single united realm, but a fractured land where the North stands semi-independent, rich in soldiers, poor in ships, and suddenly very interesting to a queen who commands both. Pattern interrupt. None of them see the real enemy. Beyond the wall, the dead do not care about lions, or wolves, or dragons. The White Walkers move slowly, but they move. And every wasted breath in Marine, every season Robb spends fortifying Moat Cailin instead of the wall, is time the cold steals. When Daenerys finally crosses, her dragons might find not a realm to conquer, but a war already begun in the snow. And it may be the living North, iron and ice together, that keeps her from arriving too late. The long night rewritten. Wolves, lions, and the dead. The war in the snow does not wait. By the time Daenerys' sails cut across the narrow sea, the North is already moving, not shattered warbands and broken banners, but a living kingdom under a young wolf who has learned from every wound. Robb's levies are called in order, ravens sent months earlier, roads patrolled, fords secured. The Boltons are gone or broken after their failed treachery, the phrase reduced to a warning carved in wood and blood at every inn from the Neck to White Harbor. Under Robb, the northern host is not a last-minute mob dragged from the fields. It is a standing machine that has marched to the Trident and back, that knows how to strike, fall back, and strike again across vast distances. Karstark riders scout the gift. Manderley ships run supplies up the White Knife. The Umbers and Glovers drill in the snow while the young king walks the lines, eyes cold, voice steady as he tells them the real war is coming from the north, not the south. So when the first hard reports come from the wall, they do not arrive to a scattered, traumatized people. They reach a court at Winterfell where Ned Stark sits as hand to Stannis and Robb rules as king in the north beneath the carved direwolf. In truth, the decision is already made before Maester Luwin finishes reading. The North marches. This changes the wall entirely. Instead of a desperate half-starved defense, instead of a Battle of the Bastards-style scramble to retake Winterfell before turning north, Robb sends men early and in strength. The vanguard goes first, seasoned riverlords, mountain clans, and a hard core of northern knights and archers. Behind them, a second wave of spears and fortified wagons moves slowly but steadily, building supply depots from Deepwood Motte to Queen's Crown. If this continues for even a single season, the Night King does not meet a thin black line of crows. He meets a northern host dug in around Eastwatch and Castle Black, trenches and stakes, scorpions on the heights. Karstark horse ready to countercharge his dead. The battle in the snow becomes less a miracle escape and more a grinding, organized war of attrition, where every strike of a Valyrian sword or dragonglass spear is backed by a king's logistics. Further south, the game is colder. The Lannisters, diminished after Tywin's failed northern decapitation, cannot dictate terms. Their gold still buys swords, but their name is poison after guest right was nearly torn apart at the Twins. Some Reach Lords remember, some River Lords will never forget. The Tyrells, already chastened by Stannis' victory and the loss of the Reach to Florence, weigh every raven twice. March north and bleed for a Stark king whose propaganda has painted Lannister red as treacherous blood, or hold back, let the wolves and the dead exhaust each other, then move when the room goes silent and crowns are loose. Into this tension flies Daenerys Targaryen, not over a broken realm, but over two powers that can both claim legitimacy. Her dragons cast shadows over a north that is not on its knees, and a crown in King's Landing that is no longer hers by right or by conquest. She finds not supplicants, but negotiators. Ned's earlier counsel to Stannis still hangs over the realm like a drawn sword. This does not need to end in blood. If the Dragon Queen lands at White Harbor instead of Dragonstone, if she meets Robb's envoys before Stannis's, the alliance that forms is not one of desperation, but of wary equals. Wolf and dragon can bargain from strength. She has fire. He has the only kingdom that is already prepared for the cold. And standing between them, as always, is Jon Snow. In this timeline, Jon's rise at the wall is slower, but no less certain. He is still the one who listens to the wildlings, who sees the dead with his own eyes, who understands that the old stories are not stories at all. But when he sends his desperate letters south, they do not vanish into southern intrigues. They land in Winterfell's hall, where Robb and Ned stand over a map of the gift, counting days and lives. So picture the Long Night's first true moment, not a scattered north rallying around a single resurrected bastard, but a line of torches atop the wall, the wind screaming, the forest below black and shifting. Robb Stark, crowned, cloak snapping like a banner, stands beside Jon in black, Lord Commander and King, sharing the same thin strip of stone. Their breath steams in the air as horns sound once, twice, 3 times. The torches along the wall slowly gutter as the temperature drops. Men fall silent. In the distance, beyond the haunted forest, 1,000 blue eyes open in the dark. And for the first time in thousands of years, the North faces the dead not as prey, but as an army waiting for the signal to strike. Character fates flipped. Sansa, Arya, and the king in the North. Myth, the dead gather in the dark. But in the halls of men, other legends are still being written. Word of the wall spreads slowly at first, carried by cold riders and colder ravens. And as it does, the fates of Ned Stark's children twist around one hard fact. The Red Wedding never happened. No flayed man flies over Winterfell. No Bolton sword has drunk Stark blood under guest right. The North still has a crowned king, and that changes everything. For Sansa, it means her story does not bend back to Winterfell as a scarred avenger. She remains a piece on the southern board. In King's Landing, she is still the high-born hostage whose name can shatter northern morale if this continues. So Stannis and Ned move carefully, trading prisoners and oaths instead of heads. When she finally leaves the capital, it is not in the dead of night with Littlefinger's cloak around her shoulders, but under formal escort to the Vale, a ward and bargaining chip whose value has doubled now that her brother wears a crown. In the Eyrie's thin air, she learns to smile, to listen, to read the room the way her mother read a war council. The Vale Lords weigh every word she speaks, because in truth, she is no longer a broken girl from a fallen house. She is the king's sister, the key to half the north if any southern lord dares to reach that far. Arya's road is darker, but it bends differently too. At the Twins, there is no slaughter music, no crossbowmen in the gallery. Walder Frey dies screaming, yes, but he dies under stark justice. not with a little girl's blade in his throat. Arya hears the tale secondhand, a rumor in a smoky inn. Her brother broke the phrase, her mother watched the old weasel beg, and the banners of House Frey burned until the night was bright as day. When she whispers her list by the campfire, one name is already gone. Another, Roose Bolton, never rises high enough to earn a place. Without that raw, personal wound, Braavos feels less like destiny and more like a choice. She may still cross the sea, still stare into the silent eyes of the faceless men, but the pull of home is stronger when home still has a living king and a mother who might be waiting. Around Robb, the king in the north myth shifts from martyrdom to something more dangerous, a living legend. In canon, a dead Robb becomes a perfect story, a clean symbol men can carry without fear. Here he is present, making mistakes in real time, his breath steaming in war tents as lords argue. Songs about the young wolf at the Whispering Wood share space with bitter mutters about Glover levies and grain tithes. The room goes silent when he enters, but behind bowed heads, there are always eyes measuring him, asking if this boy can truly stand beside the kings of old. Jon feels that weight like a hand on his shoulder at the wall. He is still the bastard, still the sword in the dark, but every raven from Winterfell carries his brother's seal. Every victory and setback a reminder that the North already has a king. There is no sudden acclamation in a crowded hall, no cry of king in the North around him. His legend, if it comes, must be something colder, something that does not threaten the crown his brother wears. Bran's path bends around that same crown. When he returns from beyond the wall, he does not find a burned ruin waiting for a Stark to claim it. He finds a functioning court, a mother ruling in her son's absence, a web of loyalties that have not yet learned to fear magic. A crippled boy who sees through birds' eyes is unsettling, yes, but he is still a prince, still a Stark, and that buys him time. The old gods have sent a strange gift, and a North with a stable king can afford to wonder what that means before it reaches for the sword. And over all of this hangs the question of memory. In our world, bards sing of the Red Wedding as a wound that never closes, a night of treachery that turned honor into a funeral dirge and made Robb Stark more powerful in death than in life. Here, the song is different. Minstrels still pluck at the same thin strip of dread, still tell of candles snuffed and doors barred, but the melody twists at the last moment into something fierce and uneasy. The young wolf who turned a massacre into a siege, who walked out of the twins with Frey blood on his boots and his banners intact. It is a triumphant saga, but not a comfortable one. A king who survives betrayal must live with what he did in answer. His people must live with it too. And as the dead mass beyond the wall has blue eyes open in the dark, another question creeps into every hall from White Harbor to the Eyrie. If the North already has its living legend, what happens when the dead demand a king of their own? From one night at the Twins to the fate of a continent, from that single breath at the Twins, everything bends. Taetalon's fingers brush Roose Bolton's sleeve, feel cold links beneath soft cloth, and her eyes sharpen. One accusation cuts the music before it starts. No crossbow looses, no bard shifts to the reins of Castamere. Instead, steel flashes as northern knights surge to their feet, overturning tables, dragging swords from scabbards while Frey men hesitate, caught between their orders and the weight of guest right. For a heartbeat, the room goes silent. Then Robb gives the only order that will keep his people alive. Walder Frey dies first. Roose follows, trying to slip away in the chaos, only to find Catelyn's warning has already turned every northern gaze upon him. His betrayal never becomes legend. It becomes evidence in a hasty trial held with blood still on the rushes, where Robb and his lords decide that this does not need to end in blood. Beyond the guilty, the twins are seized, the crossing claimed, and Tywin Lannister's neat design shatters in a single night he never sees. From there, the map itself changes. A living king in the north rides back through a Winterfell that is never flayed, never handed to a Bolton warden. Its great hall scarred by war, but not by treachery. The North and Riverland stand not as broken victims, but as a hardened block, with a secure bridge at the Green Fork and no need to beg passage from Freys who no longer exist. The Lannister regime still holds King's Landing, but it is smaller, poorer, bleeding men into a war that refuses to die on schedule. In truth, everything that followed the Red Wedding now twists. There is no Bolton wardenship, no Ramsay ruling from a burnt shell, no northern houses forced to kneel to flayers. Sansa's path south shifts. She is not the last Stark heir to be bartered, but a living symbol in a family that still has a crowned brother, a mother and banners to call. Arya's long, lonely road is shorter, with no slaughter at the twins. The list in her head does not grow so long. Her steps do not drift so far into the faceless dark. And Jon, a united North under Robb, means the boy at the wall is no longer the quiet, forgotten bastard. He becomes the king's brother, the one man Robb trusts to hold the line in the snow. When the wildlings mass and the White Walkers stir, the letters that ride south from Castle Blackland, on a king's table in Winterfell, not on the desk of a distracted hand in a distant city. That changes Daenerys as well. She does not sail toward a decapitated realm ruled by a boy king and a lion grandfather, but toward a continent with two hardened powers, a diminished but dangerous Lannister crown in the south, and a war-forged Stark kingdom in the north. Her dragons meet not only Lannister steel, but northern pride, oaths of independence, and a people who will not bend simply because a foreign queen arrives with fire. Yet the same strength that saves lives also deepens fault lines. Tywin's legacy in this timeline is not the unassailable mind that ended the war with a wedding, but the man whose most infamous gamble failed, who had to bleed his house and his realm in a longer, harsher conflict. If this continues, if Robb and Tywin both survive long enough to shape their worlds, the human realm may be stronger on paper and far more divided in spirit when the long night finally falls. So the question that hangs over this new Westeros is not just who wins the throne, but something colder. Are they actually better off without the Red Wedding? Or has the survival of one young king made it harder to unite in time against the dead waiting in the dark? Closing the gates of the twins. Your turn in the War of Five Kings, so we come back, slowly, to that one frozen breath in the twins. The music begins. The doors close. Catelyn's fingers tighten on Roose Bolton's sleeve, feeling the cold mail beneath his silk. His eyes do not quite meet hers. In canon, a knife opens her son's heart, and the hall explodes in blood. Here, one choice cuts a different way. A warning is whispered, a sword is drawn a heartbeat early, a single man refuses to sit and die. The room goes silent, and the Red Wedding becomes a red standoff. From that instant, everything you've just watched unspools. Law, honor, treachery, none of them distant ideas, all of them drawn like blades. Guessed right is not a story told by old men. It is a shield Robb Stark slams down on the table as archers hesitate. A king's word is not poetry. It is the chain that drags Walder Frey toward the noose or buys him one more bitter year behind his walls. In Westeros, every vow is a weapon, and when one weapon misfires, every other hand has to grope for a new grip or be cut down. In truth, that is what you've seen from Tywin to Jon to Daenerys in this timeline. Tywin's careful cruelty backfires, forcing him to bargain instead of butcher. Jon's path twists as a living king. In the north casts a long shadow over the wall, changing whose eyes he has to meet when he sends men to die in the snow. Daenerys feels a different wind across the narrow sea, hearing of a young wolf who still wears his crown and might one day ask her whether this does not need to end in blood. But now the gates of the twins close behind you, and the road splits. Should Robb have driven south like a storm and hurled the north against Casterly Rock, trusting speed and fear to strike before Tywin could breathe? Should he have turned back instead, sealing the neck, rebuilding Winterfell, and daring every southern king to break themselves against northern ice? Or, in a world where dragons still beat their wings over Slaver's Bay, should a Wolf King have sent envoys east, offering justice for guest right in exchange for fire? If this continues, how many other branches are waiting? Perhaps Roose Bolton, caught between exposure and extinction, truly crawls back to Stark loyalty and dies for it, a cold knight finally choosing the right side of the sword. Perhaps Walder Frey slips away in the confusion, vanishing into the Riverlands as a hunted, silent spider of a man, poisoning this victory for years. Perhaps Tywin, cornered and desperate, embraces open violation of guest right across the realm, turning every feast into a battlefield and every prayer into a lie. Those are paths for another night. If you want to ride them, if you want to see what happens when Blackwater Bay ends differently, or when Ned Stark walks out of the throne room alive, then stay. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, and tell me in the comments which betrayal you want overturned next. Choose your moment. Choose your strike. The next What If begins where you decide Westeros takes its breath.